With the numerous endorsements from all over for athletes ranging from the small to the lucrative, it was something they built over time for athletes to earn more and more, and for companies to go along with it. So let's look at how lucrative athlete endorsements slowly became a massive thing.
Totally sports-esque. Majorly.
For this, we can go back a couple years to the ancient Olympics. The victors at the ancient Olympics didn't receive money or internet clout, but they still got the same treatment a top athlete would get in the modern day. They would often receive benefits such as having their meals paid, receiving front row seats at theaters and festivals, and they were entitled to receiving a statue of themselves. Obviously they weren't paid to endorse something, but the incredible amount of praise athletes got is far from being a new thing, along with plenty of hate. When an Olympic winner from Crotona re-entered the games as a Syracuse native and won, citizens of Crotona decided to tear his statue down and condemned his house into a prison, something that could have been used as a marketing opportunity. But fast forwarding a few years, the athlete who was seen as the first athlete to endorse a product in the modern age, at least modern in comparison to the ancient Olympics, is Honus Wagner. In 1894, Wagner became friends with Bud Hillerich. Hillerich had been creating baseball bats with the help of his father owning a woodworking shop, and though his father didn't think there was any money in selling baseball bats, as he was more interested in selling swinging butter churns, Bud would continue to improve the quality of his bats. And in 1894, the bats were trademarked as Louisville Sluggers, named after Pete Louisville Slugger Browning, who according to legend, asked a 17-year-old Bud Hillerich to make him a personalized, handcrafted bat in 1884. And when he broke out of his slump with the bat, other players came running to him. Obviously the Louisville Slugger company has done pretty good, and it got a boost in 1905 when Honus Wagner, the biggest star in the game, signed a contract to use Louisville Slugger bats, with his autograph on the bat, making him the first to do so, and reportedly the first to endorse an athletic product. And Wagner would be paid a whopping $75 to do such a thing. And Wagner didn't just stop at baseball bats, as throughout his career, he would sell gum, soda, gunpowder, razors, and tobacco products. And of course, Wagner is the face of the most historic sports card with his T206 card. The series is going to feature 254 Major League Baseball players on different cards for the American Tobacco Company, but Wagner did not consent to his likeness being on one of these cards. Most say Wagner declined because he didn't want kids who have to buy packs of cigarettes to get the cards, though as previously mentioned, he had appeared in advertisements for chewing tobacco and would later appear in one for a cigarette company, but few were created, and the lore would make the most valuable card in the world many times, though now it would be hard to break Mickey Mantle's 1952 Topps card that sold for $12.6 million in 2022. The changing landscape of America amidst the Industrial Revolution was giving more opportunities, and more baseball players would receive similar endorsements as Wagner, such as Ty Cobb, Shoeless Joe Jackson, and Walter Johnson. But amidst the numerous endorsements for kids to start smoking, the 1920s brought along really America's first superstar athlete in the country, and Babe Ruth. When Ruth was traded to the Yankees in 1920 and got to start hitting full time, he became the best player in the game, and an absolute phenomenon, catching the attention of everyone across the country, and he had the big personality to go with it, and he would be paid accordingly. In 1922, Ruth overtook Ty Cobb as the highest paid player in the game, going from $20,000 to a $52,000 salary, with the average MLB salary at the time being $4,950, and Ruth would go on to be the highest paid player in the game for a record 13 consecutive seasons, with 1930 and 31 being his highest years, where he made $80,000. But of course, it's much more when you add in the endorsements. With the help of his agent Christy Walsh, Ruth had a number of endorsers from Spalding, to watchmakers, to candy brands, to clothing brands, to his biggest endorsement in Quaker Oats, who paid him $38,625 for an ad in 1934. And when you factor in endorsements, Ruth earned six figures every year except in 1933, from 1926 to 1934. But when you account the money he made for inflation with his peak salary of $80,000, that is $1.65 million, less than what some no-name like Shohei Ohtani makes now. And just looking at his inflated salary, it doesn't seem much for how big Ruth was in comparison to today's money. But you have to factor in the times. Ruth was still earning 15 times what the average US household income was at the time, and that number grew when Americans were struggling amidst the Great Depression. The gap is still way higher in terms of top MLB player salary to the average American salary today in comparison to Ruth's time, and that's mainly because free agency didn't develop until the 1970s. And another thing to account for is Ruth was 25% of the Yankees' payroll at the time. If he was on a team like the Marlins and was 25% of the payroll, then he would make $1. But if he was on the Yankees' payroll now, he would make $76 million a year, more than what the Dodgers will be paying Shohei Ohtani to sit on the couch in 2040. So Babe Ruth was really the first athlete in America to earn mega endorsement money, capitalizing on never obtained popularity levels for an athlete. And baseball players weren't the only ones in this time to start being paid to influence the people. A couple of endorsements were brought along that would pave the way for future ones, such as golfer Gene Sarazen, who in 1922 was the first member of the Wilson advisory staff, and he would sign a contract with Wilson that would last for a record 75 years, something that would go a long way for someone like David Beckham, who would later sign a lifetime contract with Adidas, and Lebron James doing the same with Nike. Sarazen really made the contract worthwhile in 1932, when during a plane ride, Sarazen was inspired to design a club that would glide through the sand. He debuted the Sand Wedge Club at the 1932 British Open, which he won, and Wilson would sell more than 50,000 R90 clubs that year. So it was good on both ends, and would lead to the lucrative deals golfers would make in the future, such as Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson, signing deals worth 9 figures. And a couple years after Sarazen brought another first with Babe Didrikson. She was a multi-sport athlete, excelling in basically everything, and she looked to profit big time after winning 2 gold medals in the 100 meters and the javelin at the 1932 Olympics. And it came by accident. She bought a Dodge after the Olympics, and Chrysler decided to take advantage of her notoriety by running an ad that featured her praising the car. But since she was an amateur at the time, she was not allowed to accept endorsements and was suspended from amateur competition without a hearing. But she turned pro shortly after and would quickly sign a deal with Chrysler to promote Dodge Coupes at the Detroit Auto Show, then go on to sign deals with Wheaties, Timex, and just like Sarazen, a lifetime deal with Wilson, someone who would go a long way for female athletes in the future. And another one who was a first and a very surprising one, with the first to receive $1 million endorsement being a bowler. His name was Don Carter, and while he was in the Philadelphia A's farm club, he was building up arm strength through bowling. And through the 50s and 60s, he would absolutely dominate this glorious sport. He won Bowler of the Year 6 times, and was the most popular bowler of this time behind Fred Flintstone. And in 1964, he would sign an endorsement deal with bowling ball manufacturer Ebonite for $1 million, who would launch the Don Carter Gyro Balance Ball. Carter would continue to dominate this game, and receive more endorsements, as his Ebonite contract would be $975 more than what local bowler Randy won for winning your local bowling tournament. But like Sarazen, he showed that being the absolute best at anything can result in attention and a good payday if taken advantage of. And through this time, athletes would take advantage of a new medium, as they now could display their terrible acting skills with the addition of television.
New Hyundai or Subaru, right to a touchdown!
But what television of course did, besides dissolve the eyes of children sitting too close, is expose athletes to a wider audience. Not only were there tens of thousands in the stadium, but now players were being seen by millions from coast to coast. And this went a long way for Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale. Owners had a gentleman's agreement through much of the 20th century to avoid competitive bidding for players as a way to keep player salaries down. But Drysdale and Koufax held joint negotiations, and with them being huge parts of the Dodgers' 1965 World Series, they were able to sign the largest MLB contracts in history at the time, at $125,000 for Koufax and $110,000 for Drysdale. And in a time of change in the country, over the next 10 years, a new CBA would be signed that raised minimum MLB salaries $4,000 to $10,000, arbitration would be introduced, and by 1975, the modern free agency system came to be, which led to Dave Parker becoming the first athlete to earn $1 million a year after signing a 5-year, $5 million contract in 1978. And the salaries would only grow from there. And events back in the 20s helped pave the way for lucrative deals made in the 80s. Back in 1917, Converse became the first company to produce basketball shoes, and 5 years later, they hired a semi-professional basketball player who played for the Akron Firestones in Chuck Taylor. He was hired as a salesman, and his experience gave him plenty of ideas to improve the shoe. And Converse would resell the shoe to enhance ankle support and flexibility. And he would become the first athlete to endorse a shoe that would become the go-to basketball shoe in the next decade, and is still a part of history. And the advantage a company like Converse had is that everyone could wear the product rather than it just being a piece of sports equipment. And other companies would follow suit. Adidas introduced a tennis shoe endorsed by Stan Smith in 1964, and 7 years later, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar became the first NBA player to have their own shoe, with Adidas also sponsoring him. And 12 years later, Converse came back into the mix with the Converse Weapon, sponsored by the 2 biggest players of the 80s, and the 2 took the league to new levels, and Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. And their rivalry would be used to promote the shoes. And that same year brought arguably the most important athlete endorsement, and one that would end up being the biggest, with the release of the Air Jordan 1s. Nike signed Michael Jordan a year prior to an unprecedented $500,000 per year contract after he was denied by his first choice in Adidas. And as the story goes, the color scheme of the Jordan 1s caused the shoes to be banned by David Stern, and Nike would happily pay the fines as the controversy only helped him sell more. Jordan had to sell at least $4 million in shoes by his 3rd year, or Nike had the option to cancel the deal. but they sold $70 million worth of Air Jordans in the first 2 months, and $130 million by the end of the season. And Jordan would go on to have a legendary career and business career, with the Jordan brand bringing in $6.59 billion in revenue in the year of 2023, that being 13% of Nike's total sales, with Michael Jordan himself earning 5% of the sales. And the deal working out so well led to a number of basketball players bringing in lucrative money and endorsements for shoes and other products. LeBron James will make $1 billion with his deal from Nike. Kevin Durant signed a deal for $300 million with Nike. Steph Curry signed for $215 million with Under Armour. James Harden signed for $200 million with Adidas. And countless numbers of other players will go on to sign massive deals. And through the 21st century, contracts will continue to reach lucrative levels, and more exposure allowed for more opportunity. And just like television gave athletes more opportunity in the 50s, social media has done that, only at a much higher level. International athletes like Cristiano Ronaldo could earn $3.2 million for a single post, while Messi could earn $2.6 million. And the expansion of NIL in college has allowed even lesser-known athletes to reach sponsorship deals. And clearly, these lucrative deals will only continue to grow to unprecedented levels. And it really all started with Honus Wagner getting paid $75 to use a certain bat. And through advances in technology, negotiations, and leagues continuing to grow, athletes have become billionaires through endorsements. Something Honus Wagner was just a few dollars short of becoming. And things show no signs of stopping, as in the distant future, we'll see athletes earn upwards of $680 million from a team that they don't even play on.